the local media speaking to a Massachusetts man who was just arrested for his role in the January 6th storming of the Capitol. He has an interesting take on what went down. I enjoyed it. It was quite a fun clip. If there was something fun to come out of January 6th, this clip certainly is it.
I'm a documentarian, and you know, when you guys hear something, you guys show up as you do now and ask questions or record and see what happens. So that's what I was doing there.
So there are photos of you reportedly kind of stomping on camera equipment and stuff. Is that you in that picture the FBI is putting out?
I would not like to comment on that at this time, but I'm working everything out with the courts and whatnot, and that's that.
You know, I think that's real. First of all, clever. Got to hand it to him for. I think that's the best way to go about it. You were there documenting everything. But I think the stomping on shit will certainly hinder his defense. If I was those local reporters, I would have said, I'm also here just reporting and documenting. Can I stomp on some of your shit? But go ahead. What do you, I mean, it's just a
credit real quick. That was WPRI in Rhode Island that did that edit, because that, you know, I bash local news quite an awful lot. I think it's lazy and reactionary often, but that was excellent.
Right. Now, I don't know what this guy's role was in this. But you know, I think obviously he has a consequence to pay for what he did, but I don't think people like him should really be the focus if all he did was show up there, hold a camera, and stomp on and break some stuff. I mean, obviously,
if all he's done is destroy evidence, as somebody who is, just generally speaking, anti-snitching, I think that, a good thing. At the end of the day, I think it speaks to a certain level of entitlement in people's minds to go to like an event like this and to be documenting and taking photos and to be smiling and to be holding up their social security cards. I think that, at the end of the day, people don't want to talk about privilege because it's kind of complicated, and I agree it's overused, but there's just evidence of entitlement here that is unique to this particular subpopulation to think that they could get away with something like this and to be so confused by like what was clearly insurrection. And, then we have to, in the media and like the public discourse, have this new affluenza conversation. Like, are people allowed to be so entitled that they could just commit riots without any kind of consequences just because they didn't know what was happening and no one told them? It's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if, I can accept that, like, people, not necessarily we need to throw people into a carceral system, but we can have it both ways, that people can exist within this sort of like dichotomy of we have to have these people and like hold them up to this standard of like everyday average American who is like just trying to exercise freedom of speech, but also, they're just a little too dumb to figure things out, a little too dumb to figure out that they're at a riot. It's like, America is a little bit, I don't know, very two-faced in that sense.
Right. Absolutely. What I want to see, though, is I want to see this same type of reporting. They should show up at the funders of this event, the big money Republican backers who funded all the bus trips and the stages and the speakers and everyone's travel and all the things necessary to get down there. They should also bum rush and interview the people who were caught on camera and on audio planning the events in terms of Proud Boy leaders and militia leaders and
those people,
various groups.
A lot of those people, I think, are smart enough to cover up their tracks, at least try to. They cover up their face, cover up their tracks because they know what they're doing is not right. And I think that that's where like this kind of narrative that these people are actually culturally victims and not maybe just the victims of their own leadership leading them to the slaughter for monetary and like social gain is kind of funny, because like they don't behave as victims behave. They don't behave as somebody who's like being victimized by the state, because as somebody who's being victimized by the state, if I was at a riot, I'd cover my face up. That's the behavior of somebody who is very entitled and like is finding that entitlement being ripped away from them very quickly. And that's unfortunate because like at the end of the day, I could have told them that they're, racist, rich founders didn't care about them. They had asked me.
Right.
I could have told them before they went. I could like, like, don't listen to Trump. Like, because you're going to be in jail and he's going to be calling you trash on television. That man does not care about you at all.
Right. Right. It is amazing. First of all, perfect point. But it is amazing how many, like literally almost all of them weren't wearing masks because they just happened to do this during a pandemic in which they all staked their position as being anti-mask. Like you gotta believe that if this wasn't during the pandemic, like more of them almost guaranteed would have been wearing some sort of face covering, but in their own little political protest refused to wear any face covering due to the connection of it being a mask for the pandemic.
Their organizers aren't doing them any favors there. Like, I mean, it's easier to focus on the consequences for this sort of, I guess, loose coalition of right-wing hanger-ons who aren't self-avowed white supremacists, but who are just being confused by like this level of sheep herding going on that's being just diffused into our modern media via free speech activism or pundit culture, whatever you want to call it. It's, like it's easy to forget that, at the end of the day, these people are also dying from coronavirus alone, though. Like, this is an event that's easy like to focus on because like a bunch of them, but like their leaders are also getting them killed from coronavirus at numbers that we don't know. We don't know how many people would have worn masks if Trump and Fox News otherwise had chosen their own mask. And that's just an analogy and an indictment of our system so far, because that's the same as other things with gun violence, with not having Medicare for all. A lot of these things are allowed to exist and be promoted by millionaires, pundits, etc., in order just cynically, not because they believe them, a la Tucker Carlson, the math, but to raise money and to show up viewership. And then when old people die, like, because we're hamstrung by this idea that as long as you're not literally touching somebody, it's just their fault. It's the personal responsibility of the people who have been left at the rally or who have died in the streets because they just thought the coronavirus was not real. And the only real mention they're going to get is from cynical actors who want to use the fact that like just guy's going to go to jail because no one cares. This guy went to the rally, maybe he was confused, maybe he wasn't going to go to jail. That's just going to be used as a tool by people to prove that they shouldn't get banned from Twitter or that you shouldn't harass Bill O'Reilly at dinner. And that guy's still going to jail. No one cares about that guy but his family and himself. And that's that's just the reality of it. And like even people who like want to defend these people as middle class, whatever, like that's not going to keep them out of jail. Like helping to deplatform and get rid of people who are tricking them is going to keep them out of jail. Like giving them tools to not listen to the far right.
Right. Well, I think you are on fire there. I agree with the IMer here, rank and file. Brandon Sutton spitting hot fire today. But I will add that the first person, a woman, has officially involved in January 6th, has officially been served her sentence. And what she was, if I recall correctly, she was not facing jail time. If I recall correctly, they gave her time served for her role, and she's now home. Will never have to be in prison for this. So even though they might not be as lucky as their rich backers and the people who got them there, they're still benefiting in other ways in terms of.
I'm just sorry to interrupt, but just as a personal reason, I would never advocate jail for somebody, generally speaking, and never specifically in the case of like trying to burn down an American landmark. That just seems like, talk about setting bad precedents. I wouldn't want to, throw out the baby with the bathwater. So, I don't think they should go to jail. The question of like, how do we punish them? What do we do with them? I don't think that's necessarily always a meaningful conversation, because if the system was open to our feedback, we wouldn't have, prison abolition, now would we? Right. Like if the system was open to like, listen to what I think should happen to these people or what I think should happen to organizers, we would have a much better country. So it seems like in reality, what we're getting is a lot of rank and file who are going to be dragged into the system, going to be dragged in front of courtrooms. Maybe they get a few months, maybe they don't. But, at least at a certain level, some of them are going to have a much more real interaction with the carceral system that they supported. And like, ideally, they won't go to jail, but they'll be woken up to the reality of what it is for the rest of the country. You know, that
I,
that entitlement that led them to the Capitol building without masks might help them, you know, might be stripped away from them permanently. And, you know, unfortunately, that's just the reality of how it has to work in our country.
I agree with you on any sort of sentencing for these guys, especially the vast majority who appear to be dupes. You know, not the ones who are violently, breaking in and leading the charge and things like that. Obviously, there should be different kinds of consequences for the people who planned this thing. And I totally agree with a lot of people are gonna focus on those who were visible on video who just basically walked in because they were dupes. But I don't share your optimism in terms of these people being woken up by the system. They'll see it as they didn't get caught up in it, and obviously if others were innocent like they were, because they view themselves as innocent, they do, they also would have gotten the same slap on the wrist and gotten away. So the people in there must really deserve it.
I mean, I always try to be a little bit optimistic, but I'm inclined to agree with you. I would say that direct interaction with some of these systems, healthcare, police, prison, that, you know, so many people are convinced because they never deal with, that are functional, you know, is the quickest way to wake people up to how dysfunctional they are. We saw that with, you know, the BLM protests last summer, and the continued coverage of police violence, like making people more aware of it, making people more disgusted by it. But I also think that you're right in the sense that we have an entire propaganda network out there, not just Fox News specifically, but just an endless web of content creators who will take that interaction with the carceral system as it exists and try to turn it into like this vague conspiracy narrative, or like, well, the only reason you're being sent to jail is not because like prison and like the American system is bad, but there's just infiltration in the CIA and the FBI of leftists who are just trying to like send all of these real patriots to jail. And it's like, okay, no, that's just the FBI, you know, just the normal
Right.
FBI. I could told you that too. I could have told you that. And so, you know, I think a lot of people's instinctual reaction will eventually be tamped down by enough propaganda where it's like, okay, yeah, my interaction was bad, but it wasn't because of like the cops are bad. It's because like there's a cabal of like Jewish, lesbian, black people leading the cops, causing them to do this. You know, it's all very complicated.
Right, right. Also, the slippery. You bring up a great point about the. I could talk about the slippery slope. A lot of people, a lot of contrarians, especially, like to use like, "Oh, this is what the left advocated for, and now it's coming for them." I mean, no. If you're going to make that slippery slope argument, it's the other way around. These institutions, like the FBI, have always been giving shit and causing problems for the left. If someone was to speak out and be brave and side for those who aren't on the same side as they are, it would have been the right decades and decades ago. Like they're the ones who watched the slippery slope, if that's what you even want to argue, and
I
didn't
mean,
do anything about it.
it always feels less of like a slippery slope and more that a lot of people have accepted, you know, the neoliberalization of social justice under different terms. They believe in like trickle down social justice. They believe in that kind of second wave feminist idea that if the basically the highest clout, highest financial potential portion of a population is not being safe from, you know, whatever larger scale social phenomenon, social atrocities happening to everybody, happening to the entire phenomenon. What does that say about, you know, the rest of those people? That's the first step. Like if Oprah can't buy a $35,000 purse without being subject to racism, what does that say about the people in Cabrini Green projects? Like, doesn't say anything. That really doesn't say anything. But, you know, a lot of people see that, they see that association with power. They, you know, they're looking for clout. They belong to that loose social position of like public intellectual pundit, you know, whatever. And the idea that what they're arguing for is being born out of like a very, very narrow class allegiance versus like what is actually going to promote widespread or social or even get the ball rolling, you know, it's ridiculous. You know, we just like with social change, it's bottoms up. We know that there's no way that like preventing Nazis from being kicked off of Twitter is going to stop Trump from being kicked off of Twitter. I mean, it's going to stop like leftists from being kicked off from Twitter. That doesn't make any sense. You know, like saving Trump does not implicate any of us because it was happening before that. I think, you know, it's a little bit disrespectful to like define a problem like 90% the way through it by once it happens to somebody who you feel a little bit of kinship with.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I was just finishing my lunch. I ordered the Crowder. It was really good. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and to hit the like button. Thank you. Can't do it without you.